Welcome to those of you who are here. We've got a packed house today, so we'll be very mindful of your time. As you can see from both the email we sent out and the title slide, we're talking today about the 3 ways to change legacy slides into training video. So you are in the right place and welcome. If you're wondering who we are, we'd love to introduce ourselves. And I love all these introductions. You can keep them coming in. Hi, Daniela. Welcome to Nice to have you. My name is Kevin Ulster. I lead the learning team here at Synthesia. You may have seen me, unfortunately or not, in some of our YouTube content for Synthesia Academy and some of our customer education content. This is the other hat that I wear, what we're doing now, and that's in co-creating some of the best-in-class learning experiences, with clients. And I'm really focused here on personalization and scaled learning solutions. After all, we are an AI video company, so we're interested in things that scale. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Ellie.
Yep, I'm Ellie. I'm the other half of the learning team, and I am an e-learning and instructional designer. I've been in that role for about 6 years now. And what I'm working on at Synthesia is, helping with that product education, helping people get good at using it, but also helping people leverage their avatar counterparts well, especially in the learning space. I'm really hoping that we can, as educators, find ways to put this technology to good use, extend ourselves, and be more impactful with our learners. So always looking for great examples of learning content that was produced with Synthesia and trying to come up with some of it my own. And in the process, trying to find some joy and fun in it, because, learning can sometimes be intense. We're dealing with tough topics, but honestly, working with technology like this is so much fun. And so I hope we can convey that a little bit to you and help you have a little bit of fun in your experience here, both today and as we use Synthesia.
So our mission and where we're heading today. So from working with you all, we know that there are many applications in the learning space alone. And I know based off our roster, each of you is in your own part of your Synthesia journey and how you're using avatars. I'm also very conscious. I've been, of course, following some of your work, which feels funny to say on our end, and know that we have everyone on the range from people who are power users and pros to some folks who are just getting started. So our goal today to meet you all where you're at is to showcase some of the best use cases of Synthesia when it comes to training video. So for the topic for today, we selected legacy content because in speaking with our clients, we found it's probably the biggest request that we have. We have static content, PDF slides, things that we have lying around that we need to transform into some sort of engaging video. That's the bottom line. And so as the email subject line suggested for today, we're about speed. We can talk about other things like localization, or we can talk about scaling learning, but today is really just about speed. And so we'll be taking you through 3 scenarios in which you're translating static content into Synthesia videos. And after each of these examples, we'll discuss what works about this case, as well as what is the stretch technique, what can you apply to in your own context to make your videos that much better. So again, providing that entry point for leveling up your existing content. And rest assured, as we go through these scenarios and these examples, we'll be dropping links in the chat so that you can check these out. And also, of course, we'll send you these resources after the webinar. So of course, you can view these on your own time. So where we are headed. So over the next 40 minutes or so, we'll start by talking about the why. So why are we converting legacy content? I think it's important to level set on this before we get started. We'll spend about 25 minutes talking about the 3 styles of content translation. We'll then go into a recap and reflection. Would love to give you some time to take away, some of these techniques that we're talking about. And then we really reserve the rest of the time for Q&A. A lot of today is we want to show you something, but we'd really like to answer your questions and really connect with you all as well. Just a few things. This is not going to be a completely passive experience. Ellie and I really would love to have you do as much as you can, given that it's a webinar. So we have a few polls for you. We'll be dropping our questions into the chat for Q&A, but also feel free again to use that Q&A button to put in your questions so that we can monitor, we can answer that, make sure those get answered, as well as just drop them into the chat as well. We're happy to find them either way. So if your hands are away from the keyboard, or if you're looking at your phone, that's okay. Just be ready to type in the chat as well. And so the last thing before we get started is Our guiding question for today and what you should have kind of overarching all of this content and what you should be thinking about in the back of your heads is how can you use synthetic media to create a more engaging experience? And so that's whether that's using our avatars or thinking of other ways you can use synthetic voices or synthetic media. Just think about that. We'll circle back to this question in the end. This is more so just a way to frame kind of where our interests are in terms of moving beyond the content that we're talking about today. So with that, let's get kicked off. Our first stop today, why are we converting slides into training video? And so this is a fairly common narrative, something that we've seen, but really we're starting back in pre-pandemic. We're starting back in 2020, and this is just on the next slide. There we go. It's always important to understand the story we're trying to tell. So originally back in 2020, we had face-to-face training where we were conducting trainings in class or online. But then once we moved into the pandemic in 2020, you all probably shifted into something that was like emergency remote training. And I'm referring that to emergency remote training because we really were just taking our in-person habits and moving them on into Zoom. So it wasn't quite as well thought out as a full e-learning experience, or it wasn't a fully interactive, immersive online training. And so just moving up a year where we are more today is we're looking at turning that content into e-learning because our learners want the content in their learning ecosystem where they can access it on their own time and not delivered in Zoom trainings where they're forced to carve out parts of their day, which some of you are doing right now. So we really are looking to transform this content into something that people can view asynchronously, but we don't want to lose engagement with the content. And so we boiled this down from our conversations into several buckets that we have for you about, why we're converting slides into training video. And so the first of these is, well, one, because looking at slides is boring. We know that if you are translating content into slides and you're just voicing over your content, that it's going to be an isolating experience. It's something that people could have watched on their own or read through slides on their own. And so this is really the bulk of content when it comes to us. It's, oh, I've just done a voiceover on PowerPoint and I'm looking to upgrade that. Another camp that we have is we know that face-to-face training is not working. So either folks don't have the time for it, or if you're looking at localization, which I know some of you are, if you have a global training team and you have a curriculum that's based in English, if you're moving into other languages or markets, sometimes that curriculum does not translate well. And so you're trying to think about how you can use Synthesia to generate video in other languages quickly and in a context that makes sense for that audience's native speakers. And then the third is because we're revamping legacy content. If you're coming from a large organization, which I know that some of you are, you probably had the same compliance training decks or programmatic training. Maybe it's some self-directed learning that you're looking to spice up with some engagement techniques and a little bit more of the avatars and the voiceover. But I think this is where we pitch it back to you before we go any further. And we want to know which of these camps resonates with you. Is it that the slides are boring? Is that face-to-face training isn't working? We have a poll that should be going up fairly shortly. Let us know. We'll give you about 30 seconds to answer. Something should have just appeared on your screen. And we want to know which of these situations resonates with you. So we have, the votes are coming in fairly quickly. Is it that your slides are boring and you want to spice up content, which it looks like so far a third of you are? Don't have time for face-to-face training, about 15%. Revamping legacy content. Interesting. And so right now we have 46% of people who have responded so far, and we love to see more. But I'm curious for that 8%, those two people who have voted for something else. Can you tell us a little bit more in the chat, either to everyone or to the hosts and the panelists? What is the problem that you're trying to tackle? What is the pain point that's coming up for you? And I think we still have some folks who are thinking, or maybe they're still reading through these comments. So let's close out the poll. So just to report out what we heard, it's about 46% of you who said that your slides are boring and you want to spice up your content. So we definitely have some techniques for you today. Because we don't have time for face-to-face training, we hear you there as well. And so you're trying to convert your content. And then 35% of you selected because we're revamping legacy content. So still waiting to hear from those folks who are interested in something else and what that might be. So if you've got plenty of time, feel free to drop that in the chat. In the meantime, we will continue on with our program. Oh, I'm going to pause you there real quick, Ellie. I'm so sorry. They just got their answers in. We want to produce content when we can't rely on the speaker to produce videos. So if you have a content workflow and you have you're looking to just automate that process, you don't want to rely on somebody's off day to give you your high quality content. Heard you there. And then one more, we want to offer information in other formats as text. Our customers are tired of reading lots of instructions on our website. We hear you there. We produce content about that. Ellie, I see you shaking your head and smiling. Is that that's something that I think resonates a lot with you?
Oh yeah, I have done this. I have had to take old technical manuals and turn them into video in the past, and I had to do it the hard way without Synthesia. So I get it. You hit a threshold where your people are not learning from that stuff, and something has to be done. I'm glad you're here with us, and you don't have to go the long way that I did. But yeah, it's an absolutely perfect use case for getting into Synthesia. So that's fantastic. I think there's so many good things. I think it makes sense if your slides are just looking boring and you're trying to make them exciting. Total respect for that. But there is a full spectrum of need here. And we have kind of identified kind of a spectrum of opportunities for you to do that. And so we know why we need to do this work, but let's talk a little bit about how we do it. So how do you convert your slides to training video? I'm not going to promise you that this is a push button solution. We've gotten about as close as we can, but there are some things you need to be thinking about just straight out of the gate when you take on this mission. And really, we see it as a 3-step process. It doesn't matter if you're doing the most basic upgrades or if you are taking something like an instruction manual and taking it all the way to like a deep branching scenario course. No matter how big that journey is going to be for you, it's basically going to follow these 3 steps every time. And I want you to keep these in mind because sometimes we get so enthusiastic, we want to go straight to step 3, jump into studio and start producing. But I want you to keep in mind what we need to do first. And so the first is to always revisit what you've got. You know, it may just be a PowerPoint deck, it may be a PDF, it may be that instruction manual, but revisit it and think about what was the learning objective originally, or what have you got, you know, right now, what is the purpose of it? Who are you presenting it to? Revisit that and see if that still resonates, or if there's something you might need to revamp before you launch into this whole process. You'd be amazed. Sometimes you realize like, oh, this is actually kind of outdated for a workforce that we don't really have anymore, or there's a job description that is not included in this. Think about that early, because you don't want to get all the way to step 3 and not have thought about that. But then once you kind of have your stuff in order, we want to get into chunking. In instructional design, we're thinking about chunking all the time. We're thinking about how we can get this content formatted in a way that is easy to digest, is exciting to digest for your learner. But when you think about using Synthesia, chunking really has to be about scripts as well. You want to be thinking about this other medium you're introducing, this audio, this narration, and how you're going to take this content and turn it into this new format. And that's something that was a learning curve for me. I'd done so much chunking where I was taking text and writing up better text with it, but I wasn't necessarily writing for an avatar, for a voiceover. And so that's a new thing that I want you to kind of keep in mind, writing for a voice instead of just writing for information. And then finally, we get to the fun part. We get to that reproduction. And this can be pretty simple. This can be inserting an avatar into a deck you've already got, or it can be branching out into massive courses, into video libraries, into character building where you've got multiple avatars that you're using over the course of multiple videos. It can be so much, but all of these, no matter how big or small, are going to kind of flow through these 3 paths, and so 3 steps. And so just want to lay out that path before we get into the scenarios where we're using this path right now. And so we're going to talk about the 3 kind of scenario styles that we have seen, we experience, and that we think might work for you and what you're trying to do. The first one is that I kind of alluded to this. We call it the quick and dirty. This is, I've got some content, let's get it out the door as fast as we can. I'm going to show you an example. It's actually based on work that I used to do. So this example is a deck from an instructor-led workshop. I was the instructor, and this was a course that I facilitated. And at the beginning of the course, we give a disclaimer basically saying, are you qualified to be in this class? Here are the criteria to use this platform and to be in this class. Make sure you're in the right place and you don't need to be sent somewhere else. That's not the best time to give that information to a learner. The best time would be well before they got into my classroom. And so what I reimagined here was taking that piece of my presentation, lopping it off, and then getting it to them earlier. And so this is a short video that I made, and all it is was taking these slides from my previous PowerPoint, putting them into Synthesia, and then repurposing them into a video. And so the point here was to spend as little time and energy as possible on this. This is not my primary objective. My classroom is my primary objective, but this is a way to do a little pre-learning, a little orientation before they get in my class. And so this just leverages that fantastic button that we all love so much, that import PowerPoint button that we've got here in Synthesia. All you have to do is drop in your PowerPoint slide, boom, I get all my slides. And then I can go ahead and put an avatar in there. But what I want to show you with this example is kind of how to be mindful while you do this. Sure, I could have just put Anna on every single slide and had her speak my notes and just fully reproduce what that classroom experience was but I had to reconsider my audience now. Now these people are not in my classroom. They have not been briefed. I haven't had a handshake moment with them. We need to write, so she's now kind of their guide. And also, we want to make sure we don't visually overwhelm them in the process. So her voice and the visuals needed to be rethought here. And so I'm not going to play the whole video for you. I'm just going to show you a couple slides and kind of emphasize, when you're doing this quick and dirty, the thing that you should keep in mind. First, you're going to see I've got Anna, I've got her here on my screen, and she's kind of taking up the whole screen. There's a little bit of an intro title. This is a nice visual balance because Anna's not competing with anything else on the screen, really. It's just an introduction. But pretty quickly, I'm gonna show you a slide, and I am an offender of this, a very text-heavy slide, right? This is our qualifications. This used to be in an instruction manual that we handed out. People had to read this and sign off that they understood it. Here, I've taken Anna away because she would be competing with this, and her voice would also be competing with the text on screen. You can't see it, but the script here is actually reading this line by line verbatim. And the reason for that is we don't want the learner's voice in their head that they're reading the text with to compete with Anna's voice. Instead, we harmonize them. And so as Anna reads along, they read with her. And that's a much nicer experience for them. So if you are going to have text-heavy legacy slides and you're going to put them into Synthesia, make sure you're keeping it light. Make sure you're matching that audio up with whatever text is on screen. The third thing that you can consider here is kind of a middle option of a small Anna balanced with your visuals really nicely. Here I've got a graph. I can consume the information in the graph and see Anna on the side without them competing with each other. But I didn't make her front and center. She's not the main thing here. She's kind of balancing out this. So when you do this import slide, I want you to think about the visual balance and the audio balance as well, because that's going to make a better experience for your learners. But besides thinking about where I put Anna and how I wrote the script to jive with what's on screen, I didn't change anything about these slides. And I was able to put this together in 30 minutes. I can deploy this, get it out. Now I have this piece of information out in the world before people get in my classroom. I'm making a better learning experience immediately without anything. I didn't have to put this in LMS. It's hosted on a website or put in email. Easy peasy, quick and dirty, got a new piece of information out in the world. So this is a really common use case for our learners. And I just want to call out the fact that that's fantastic. It's great. It's an easy way to upgrade. But it's not necessarily the most design heavy or the most creative. And we're going to kind of level up the spectrum now and kind of move through more scenarios where we're using these tools. So to recap this one, when would you use this? You've got existing content and you need to redeploy it yesterday. This needs to be out there. You don't have time to do voiceover work. You don't have time to redesign everything. We got to go. So I showed you kind of the most basic version of this. How could we level that up a little bit? I would get rid of those text-heavy pieces. I get rid of that text-heavy slide. Instead, I would take the time and the energy to introduce a talking head, make Anna the focal point of that slide, and then potentially animate in some text, add in some stock footage, screen recordings to illustrate the point. And then the other thing I would do is look to our templates for inspiration. We have a team of fantastic graphic designers who have thought about balancing these visual elements. They've thought about how can I put this information on screen without overwhelming myself. And they also have thought about how to choreograph text in a way that is going to get rid of some of that text heavy stuff. So I would turn to those templates and see how you could maybe emulate those in PowerPoint before you do the importing in order to bring a little bit more visual balance. But, you know, we covered the baseline. Now we've seen a little bit of a level up on that. You know, this is just a way for you to start using this stuff fast and well. But it kind of also leads us into a second scenario. This is our pick and mix. Here's where we're not fully going to get away from our legacy slides. We're going to bring a lot of what we built there over, but we're going to start thinking a little bit more about video instead of an animated slide deck. And so I love this one because this is actually a user example. I saw this posted in our Synthesia Facebook group and I immediately was like, this guy gets it. This is so good. And we've dropped a link in the chat so you can watch this one as well. Basically what this was legacy content, a bunch of lecture slides that were meant to explain core concepts in a course at a university. Again, we're in an academic setting. This is high level stuff, but this is stuff that the professor should not be spending their time on. This content was meant to make it bite-sized, easy to access. And so what they wanted to do was turn those slides that weren't getting a lot of engagement and turn them into something that could be accessed in to supplement the lectures that the students were attending, using the developer's PowerPoint skills and leveraging the avatars at the same time. And so this developer still stayed in PowerPoint, built these animations out in PowerPoint because that's where their strengths were, and then combined the PowerPoint slides with some stock footage and the PowerPoint animations, brought it in and put our one of our favorite avatars, Jack, on top of it, and then made a little library of these core concepts for their user. And I'm just going to show you real quick kind of what that looks like, and you can kind of see the pieces that are PowerPoint and the pieces that are Synthesia.
Let's go through example. Suppose that a chocolate manufacturer starts a marketing campaign in which it places 5 golden tickets randomly amongst 200,000 chocolate bars.
And so those little animated pieces of text, done in PowerPoint. So was the video. He just wasn't to a point where he was feeling super confident with what Synthesia could offer. He'd already made animations like this before. He was repurposing content he'd already done. So he brought that into a PowerPoint deck, imported that, and then this is what the outcome was. It's fantastic. It's a great use of playing to your strengths. And then it turned into an entire course library. So this is a really good example of you know, going a little bit beyond the PowerPoint, the slide, and turning into something more cinematic. And so really, really love this example. And Kevin's got another example of the pick and mix method.
Yeah, so this next example that we're about to show you is kind of what happens when somebody starts out in this econ example world and then tries a few more new things until suddenly they have made their full video in Synthesia. So what you'll see in just a little bit here is with a client who wanted to produce a series of micro learning videos on a series of micro learning videos for financial, some basic financial literacy. And originally they started out as PowerPoint slides, and the overall goal was to recreate these entire slides into video. And the format that it ended up being in, and we'll drop a link into the chat in just a second so you can check that out. Thank you, Ellie, is a playlist of 9 micro learning videos that are hosted on YouTube. These are all this content ended up being chunked and put into a series of lessons that are less than 2 minutes, all into a cohesive micro learning experience. And again, we're recreating these decks using Synthesia in the template. So what we started out with was just recreating what you see, this type of slide here in Synthesia. And so you can, when you watch these, you'll see that we're not only adding the talking head onto the slide, but also we're animating different elements on the screen. And what we came up with that I think is not unique to this, but something worth exploring is this idea of jingling the keys. It's an engagement kind of overarching strategy that we really suggest clients have, where if you want to increase engagement, you should be having something, even if it's the smallest shape, moving on the screen at all times. Or you should really be thinking that, you know, your learner's engagement you should be changing what's on screen every 10 to 20 seconds. So you're always changing what's on screen, always keeping it fresh, always keeping your learners engaged. So that's jingling the keys. And these videos were created 100% in studio. I think I'm looking at some of you who are out in this webinar, and I know that you are exporting avatars into Premiere or what you're used to, and that's perfectly fine. I know that's your workflow. I think where we're suggesting folks build video in Studio is that if that content needs updating, you can swap out the old text for new text, or if you're into localization, you can swap out the old script for a translated script and generate your video. So it's more time savings and cost savings in the long run if you're building within Studio. And then the lesson to be learned here from IG is that if you're willing to take the time to develop one good Synthesia video, you can turn that into a template. And so if you'll see that there's a standard format in these videos, whether it's about creating a layout for introducing a lesson or the objectives or a key definition. Once you have that layout for each of those lessons, it's as simple as swapping out the text or the image. All the animations stay there. And if you want to update that content again in the future, you simply retype and regenerate that new video. So I think that the next question is, when would you use this? Well, everyone has content that needs to be updated regularly. At Synthesia, we call this 80% content, really answering the question, what is the information that 80% of the company needs to know? And what are the questions that you're always answering? So maybe that's programmatic training or FYIs or micro-learning or standard operating procedures. Those can be Synthesia videos very easily. You have, and maybe this is for if you have a little bit more time to reimagine the video viewing experience. You're not changing the entire learning experience, but you want to make a more powerful, engaging video. So how could you level up with this technique? Your stretch technique is, again, you want to jingle the keys. You want to increase engagement by changing what's on screen every 10 to 20 seconds. And you can do that with stock footage, a talking head, a screen recording, or animating a chart. And then again, once you've identified a layout for the content, what are those elements of your video or your lesson that repeat over and over? It's time to come up with a template for those. It's time to come up with a layout so that all you have to do when it comes to creating your content is matching the content in the document to the layout that's required. So definitely check out those IG videos. Keep an eye out for what are the different content types or layouts that are in those videos, and think about how that maps onto the content you're trying to create. So without further ado, we're going on to scenario number 3, which is dramatically called the full departure. And so the reason that we call this the full departure is because it's really about using Synthesia in the context of all the other tools that you're using. We would never ask you to make Synthesia the one-stop shop. Of course, we'd love if you use this for everything, but we know that your tool, your tech stack is full of other tools that you've been using to create your learning experiences. So what I have here is a very interesting learning experience from FIS Global. And what they had, very interestingly, was a paper curriculum that was complete with a face-to-face facilitator guide. And I think this is interesting because I know that you all, as instructional designers or training managers, you have these scripts, you have these runs of shows, you have them all somewhere just like we do. And so the overall goal of this was to create a young adult financial literacy course from that facilitator guide. So it ended up being it's formatted in 22 lessons. And what you can see and how they created this course was they ended up swapping out in the facilitator guide where it mentions the narration, what you would say in training or what you would say in the classroom. They literally converted that into Synthesia avatars. Again, nothing fancy, just a talking head over the open office background. And I know that we have a link to that FIS course as well, because it's definitely worth checking out. Again, this is the legacy PowerPoints that were used in that in the original prototype for the course. They're still in there. They're narrated by the course creator, and they're reserved more for the personal parts of the lesson, where you want to teach lessons or you want to guide your attendees through a reflection. And then he also redesigned some of the learning activities and knowledge checks using Articulate Rise. And so definitely take that course, or at least just click through it so you can see how we put all those elements together. Some of the content is best served by video, some is by text, some by charts, some by pre-existing PowerPoints, but it's how he puts them all together that really makes the learning experience. And the lesson learned here is that it's so easy to add just a slight level of personalization to your course, to not make your learners feel alone if you put it into intros, stories, key concepts, case studies. There's all these easy to add parts, and it's how you use the avatars and then combine them with other media that matters. Synthesia is just one tool in your massive toolkit. The final example that we have for you today of scenario number 3, the full departure, is really about moving from presentation to full immersion. So the use case here was that ETU wanted to develop a simulation course about ethics and compliance. And this, thank you, Ellie, for dropping the link in. It's going to take you may have to add an email in there, but definitely check this course out. They're using Synthesia avatars for branching scenarios. So really thinking about that interactivity, letting your bringing your learners close to action and letting them make choice and see the consequences of that. HU has an interactive platform that they use that guides you through the different choices. And their solution that they used Synthesia for was to develop characters. So in the screenshot here, you can see Matt. He is sort of serving as the overall narrator for the course, kind of that if you're watching a play, maybe he's the course that comes up and tells you what's about to happen. But then also in this course, there are Synthesia avatars that also serve as characters who make choices, and they have a story, and you really feel like they're avatars, so you feel like you're interacting with them, but you get to see their choices and the results of that through storytelling. And so I know this might seem like a really big leap for some of you who are maybe thinking about that first scenario, quick and dirty, but if you're interested in going in this route, there's a few steps that we can lay out for you. One is there may have already been a simulation that gets played out in face-to-face training, or maybe even a reflection activity. This is something where you take that activity, and your next step is to rewrite that experience in a branching scenario or as a prompt. And then step 3 is to use Synthesia avatars as learning guides or companions. And our resident expert, Ellie, can you tell us a little bit about how you think about avatars as learning companions? Because in your learning content on Synthesia Academy, we see it over and over again. So can you tell us a little bit about what's the secret sauce?
I mean, this is what I was most excited about when I first learned about Synthesia, is this way to leverage the ease of video, which is the best way to be consuming content, but to also be able to get a person who sounds knowledgeable, who's articulate, and that you can immediately kind of reflect and connect with, to get that in there without all of the work, because that connection is so important. Having a person on screen has been proven to get people more emotionally engaged in content. Whether it has a direct impact on retention or performance, that's harder to make a judgment on, but it is proven that people just emotionally turn on when they see a face on the screen telling them things. So in this case, Matt is kind of like your guide. He's the authority. He's letting you know what's happening. But later in this course, we see Rosie as a colleague, a character, and you have a conversation with her, and you're empathizing with her, and you're thinking about, wow, yeah, I've faced that dilemma, or, oh yeah, that is tricky. I'm not sure how I would act in that situation, in a way that you wouldn't if it was just a reflection question of how do you feel about this, or how would you act. You are more invested in that interaction. And normally it takes a ton of work to produce these, but Synthesia allows us to put people who are articulate, knowledgeable, like Matt, in our content really easily. So this ETU example is just, it's so satisfying, because they're really leveraging the human connection that we can build with avatars. So I'm a huge fan of this one.
I was as you were mentioning that, when I think of ETU, I wish our avatars, and maybe they'll get to do this soon in the future, to do the chef's kiss, because that is, yes, it's fantastic to go through that. So definitely check out that example. As we're kind of moving towards the end of our presentation here, rather of these 3 scenarios, I think it's important to think, when could you use this? And I think the answer is when you want to create a novel, immersive e-learning experience. So it's tricky. Because, to level this up, you need to think about how you're using Synthesia with other learning tools. You can use Synthesia to create characters. And Ellie and I, we love to think of our avatars as characters whenever we create a learning experience. Are they the coach? Are they the bad student in the class that you're giving feedback to? Are they another student in that learning experience who is giving you feedback? So there's many ways that you can imagine these characters, and it's about using storytelling and interactivity to create a fully immersive experience. And so the takeaway is that I'm hoping you'll see is that It's not a heavy lift to utilize avatars in very effective and engaging ways. If animation in studio is not your forte, look at the videos that are in these best in class examples. It's just the avatar on a blank screen or an open screen. So hopefully this encourages you, those folks who I know are using us for voiceover. We're grateful that you're using us at all. But think about also, if you put a face on screen, it has the potential to really engage your learners. And so before we start heading out, one resource that Ellie and I have gone through that we really would like to send your way, especially when it comes to story design in training, is this book, Instructional Story Design by Rance Green. It's if you haven't really thought about how to add storytelling or characters, this is a very process-based didactic way to take that first step. And there's plenty of worksheets and templates and examples to take you through whatever your entry point is into story design. But it's a book that was recommended to me by a friend who's very much into VR and learning. And so she's always thinking about the narrative and where you're dropping what type of story world you're dropping your learners into. But this is just one resource that we have. And Rance has not, unfortunately, he doesn't know that we're shouting out his book if we're really on a first name basis. But I'm going to drop that in here as well as the Need a Story website, which just has some resources on there. And I realize Ellie and I really enjoyed it. And so we hope that you do as well.
Yeah, and I had mentioned at the start of this that learning to write for a character, give voice to something, is different than writing instructional content and writing a good paragraph. And I do think this book helped me reframe what I'm trying to communicate with the dialogue. So second Kevin's opinion, yeah, maybe we should tell Rance that we're like his biggest fans and talk about him all the time. But his worksheets, some of them are just a really fantastic way to get started with that process. So highly recommend. And so we'll leave you with that little suggestion. But before we go any further or hand it over to you all for Q&A, I would love to actually hear from all of you using a poll really quickly. Where do you identify on this spectrum? Like, where are you currently working? Are you in the quick and dirty, we got to get this out the door right now? Are you exploring how you can kind of use this slide-based technique and bring together video elements? Or are you trying to like shoot for the moon and do a full departure like we saw with ETU? Where are you currently in this process, and what's working for you right now? Not necessarily where you want to be, though. If you've got ideas, I hope things have been sparked by that. You might want to put it in the chat, what you're hoping to develop soon. It looks like we've got a pretty good mix in here, which is great.
Yeah.
Looking at the roster beforehand, we knew we had some great power users in here and people who are just getting started with us. So we got a good mix, and I love to see so many different ways of using the tool.
Yeah, it's if you don't see your examples on here for full departure and you think you got a good one, please let us know, but also please give us the permission to share it as well. But definitely curious to see what you're making if you're using us in conjunction with other tools. And then for the folks who are doing who are not sure, again, there's two of you. I'm wondering if it's the same two. What are you what is it that you didn't see that you're interested in? How can we help you out?
Yeah, and we're just two people, so we're always looking for more ideas, more suggestions, and we try to make best in class examples, but we're constantly getting wowed by people across the spectrum making stuff. So would love to know what we can do to help you get in one of these boats.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna where are we? Oh, all right. Thank you, Dan, for dropping that in. We'll definitely check that out. And we'll certainly circle back with you as well. Although not sure which of the Dans that is, but we'll definitely figure out which one you are, and we'll get back to you. Also, just making note that from Kathy, we will be sending these resources out. So I'm glad you're enjoying them and you want to make sure that you get them. So yes, we'll be sending everything out after this webinar. So just wrapping up the poll, just so you know where you all land today, we had about a third in quick and dirty, almost 40% in pick and mix, 21% in full departure. So that's exciting. And 8% of people who are just not sure. And really, that's a-okay. So let's see. And Phil, I use a lot of MP4 already, but would you like to add Synthesia into existing video? Interesting. So we can definitely circle back and address that in a little bit. Just in the interest of time, let's quickly recap and land this plane. Or land this rocket, excuse me. So today was really about speed. We're really just scratching the surface when it comes to translating content, meaning this is just if you're taking static content, turning that into training videos. These are just 3 of the scenarios we have. We know that folks are doing some really cool stuff, and we'd like to shout that out as well. But just really quickly, if you're looking at these 3 scenarios on a spectrum, on the left side of that spectrum is going to be speed. What do you need to get out tomorrow? We're not going to stop you from just slapping an avatar on a PowerPoint. We just want to help you make it something that looks more visually engaging. Whereas if you are in those 5 of our audience who are creating something that's a full departure, you're really thinking about the depth of learning and that immersion and interactivity. And the big takeaway from all this is start with small tests and even move between levels. Maybe it's just a talking head that you sub in today, and maybe it is a piece of stock footage that you put in place of a slide that's been up for 90 seconds tomorrow. So there's all these little techniques that we have. I think we're going to put it back onto you just one more time, where we're curious to hear from you. And again, this goes into the chat from you. How else could you use avatars in your videos? And this goes back to our guiding questions. We're really thinking about engagement and deepening learning experiences, or really any experience that you're using Synthesia for. And just another way to rephrase this question, a little bit of blue sky thinking in the chat. If time and money were not a barrier to creating videos, what type of content would you create? And we'll give you about 90 seconds to jot that down. And I know we have some questions to get to, but this is really where we put it back on you and say, okay, you've heard what we have to say, but what type of content would you create? In your dream of dreams, what is the scenario where you see an avatar being useful in your work?
Phil immediately naming one of my favorites, the multiple avatars making scenarios. Love scenario-based learning. You should really check out that ETU example if you hadn't had a second. That's a really good one, but there's so much more to explore there.
Such cool stuff. A full-length lecture content. So if I'm envisioning what you're saying, one of the Dans, that is almost like a master class delivered fully by an avatar. That is, and if I'm wrong and you have something else in mind, please. Yes, I nailed it. Just wow, that's never happened first time. But yes, a masterclass delivered by an avatar. We'll let you know as soon as we have that.
I think we're getting closer to things like that in the future. So that's amazing. More scenario-based learning. Love that. Avatars having conversations, 2 avatars on screen. Yes.
What I will suggest for that, if you're looking to start doing that tomorrow, the scenario-based e-learning where it's avatars having a conversation, we have one called, I think it's called scenario-based learning template, where it's slide on slide. You can have a conversation. I think it's set up right now to have a conversation between only 2 of the avatars, because you can't have 2 avatars on screen in studio yet. But if you're looking for a rapid prototype, definitely check that out.
Yeah. Brandon mentioning metaverse-like instruction, avatars demonstrating real-life scenarios. It's really that movie studio in a browser vision, and I know that's something that we think about too. So I love that.
Oh, George, so cool! A virtual resume. That's tip top. I'm sure you want to be recorded in studio to get your model made with the right outfit, but then once you have that, you could update. I assume you could update your resume for whomever you're talking to and really match the information to the audience. So cool. What do you think?
George is working on it. I'd love to see your prototype, George, when you get that done. So very exciting.
Oh, this is so cool. Thank you to those of you who are dropping these in And Dan, thank you for dropping that link into the chat. Adding the avatars into doodle characters forever. But characters and voices. Yes, characters and voices. That's really where we see that personalization and immersion come in. Oh, George is working on that now. Please send that to us. Just so that we can give people back the gift of time, Ellie. We just want to quickly just wrap up, and we'll remain here for the remainder of time. So please do not worry about that. The thing that we ask is that this is just as much about us learning about you as you, I'm going to say, listening to us, because I'm not sure if you learned much from me today, because I know that there's some very pro power users out in the audience today. But these are emails. These are our semi-serious professional headshots. You wouldn't think that we were that serious in real life, but we I guess we are. Oh, and thank you, Karina, for dropping in the story-based scenario template, getting set up by the team. Really appreciate that. So these are emails. Feel free to reach out and get in touch, whether that's you have an idea, you have something you want to bounce off of us, or you want to get in touch about how you move in between these three scenarios, please let us know. And the last thing that we'll say is that we, just a shout out, we're always updating the Synthesia YouTube and Synthesia Academy content. So check that out there. If you're looking for inspiration, I know also if you're working in Storyline, Ellie is creating some wonderful tutorials. And then on the last slide, this is probably the most important for us, Ellie, if I have to think about it. On the last slide, you'll get a 3-question survey. Because we want to collect data on how we're doing, and if not, you should see it you'll see that short 3-question survey in your browser, and if not, you'll see it in a follow-up email. We want to deliver content that is tailored to your needs. So please include your thoughts as well about how, what are you interested in? We're certainly saving the chat blocks here. We're certainly making ourselves open and available, but please, the survey takes about 60 seconds. So fill that in and let us know. And with that, this is where we can give people back the gift of time, or we can go back to the question slide because we have some questions that came in.
And while we wait for questions, I'm just going to drop in our Facebook user group as well. This is a fantastic place to see other examples that people are making and learn more from each other.
All right. So from Michael, so one question we have is from Michael, how I can import a video in a Synthesia video. And before we answer that, Michael, could you clarify what you mean by that? Can you just describe kind of what you're trying to do? And in the meantime, we'll move on to the next question here. Ellie, do you want to take this one?
Sure, happy to. So we got an anonymous attendee question. I dropped my PowerPoint slides into a video, and now I want to make changes to the PowerPoint slides, but I'm not sure how to do it. So it sounds like they want to add or remove items from the PowerPoint. Is that doable? So you're not able to edit the individual elements on a PowerPoint once it's in there. It's kind of like a static graphic, or a static. It's not editable with our functionality. Instead, what we encourage people to do is to start to get into that pick and mix space. You have more flexibility if you build your elements in Studio. So if you had, say, text that you were animating, trying to time it out with your avatar script. It'd be easier if that was in Studio. Usually what I encourage with people who are bringing in stuff that's from a slide is really have those slides tight before you import them. You can always re-import. You can do that. Again, I've done that where I've gone back to PowerPoint, but it's a little bit of back and forth. So really, that's where I would say start to lean into using the elements that we have in Studio, which are getting better all the time. And it allows you to have a little more finesse on some of those edits. So yeah, I'm not able to edit the individual elements on a PowerPoint slide. We got another one that just came in from Brandon. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. Oh, I just realized that we can answer Michael's really quickly as well with a feature that could be upcoming or is upcoming. So again, Michael asked how I can import a video in a Synthesia video. So currently the way you do that is you upload that MP4 file as a background, and you'd be that background layer. Now, I know that this, when you play your video, you'll be able to play the video, but not the sound. So I think what you're really asking is something around picture in picture, which is where you can have videos playing on top of your Synthesia video. It's coming. It's coming. We have an amazing product team that is working on these things, making something that's web browser based. But we just ask you to hold tight, and you'll Dan Vlad, who is on this call, will be the first to let you know via product update when that comes out. So stay tuned, Michael. Picture in Picture is coming. I'll take this next one as well. Brandon, do you all see these more as quicker types of content, 5 minutes or less? I have a lot of content with 70 to 100 slides in a deck. I think the pick and mix method might take them down. Ooh, Ellie, I have definitely my approach that I want to start to answer this with. Do you want to take a first stab at it?
Yeah, sure. I think, Brandon, you're going to need to chunk. So 70 to 100 slides is a lot. And when you've got a person in a room dynamically speaking to it, that may not seem like that much because you're using it almost like video at that point. Like you're flipping through it so fast, you're visually engaging your learners. It's a fantastic thing if you're a lecturer or a facilitator to have a ton of slides and a lot of information. It's a way to basically be multimedia in a room. But when it comes to making video, yeah, that's a lot. So I think the pick and mix method is going to be your friend, where you're going to want to be mindful about which slides you bring in, or potentially chunking that and rebuilding. So I think Kevin's going to probably propose a little bit of that.
Yeah, exactly. Chunking is definitely where it's at. I think something that can be, Brandon, it also depends on how much time you have. What's the speed with which you want to translate your content? I think something that is an option that we as designers of learning, we get married to our slide decks, these 100 slides where you're used to clicking along, what cues to come in, where to say that joke to re-engage your audience, when to circulate the room. And I think it was Hemingway who said sometimes you got to kill your darlings. So I think this is one of those, don't kill your 70 to 100 slides, but instead maybe think about what might the experience look like on a micro level. What is the 80% of information that everybody needs to hear? Chunk that up and put it into 5 minutes or less videos. And then think about, what are you going to spend your time when you're in front of learners, or you have their undivided attention on Zoom or otherwise? What are you going to use that time for instead? And so I see this as an opportunity to move away from the safety of 70 to 100 slides and maybe explore a little bit more. What is the information that's critical to your audience and that you can automate? Because AI is really about scaling your presence and yourself. How can you use your in-person human self more effectively in that learning experience? And of course, we won't leave you hanging, Brandon. If you'd like to get in touch with us about how we can help you chop that up, we're here and we're more than excited.
And we're ruthless editors. We will cut your content up. We do it to each other all the time. How could you say that with 3 less words? It's a fun challenge. It's hard, but it's a fun way to start thinking about your content in a new, fresh way.
Exactly. Ali, go ahead and take that one that just came in.
Oh, I just saw this. Okay, I just noticed that not all avatars are the same. Some of them are better, and I know it's continuously improved with monthly updates, but can we have an indicator in the avatar that shows the level of quality and smoothness? This is a good question, and it really does strike at the fact that we are iterating constantly, and we're trying to always have something really, really hot and fresh out. So we started out with our V2 avatars. We put out 2 of them just to make sure that we had 2 and let people work with them. And that was Anna and name is escaping me, one of our male avatars who I love and use all the time. We just did 2 to start and get that out there. We did V2. Now we've rolled V2 out to all the avatars. So we're working on making sure that as we make those improvements, they really, really work before we blow it out to everything else. And so then as we get better at making avatars, we can deploy them faster and they work better. I would say we don't rank them. We don't think that some are better than others, because there are some that were made a while ago who really fit a use case super nicely. That's thinking of some of ours who have specific outfits, like our doctors or our construction workers. I wouldn't rank them as being less effective. It's just that they were made a little bit earlier, but they're highly used and they're really, really appreciated. But I would just say you can anticipate that we're always going to be iterating avatars. We're always going to be finding new gestures, new smooth hand movements, way to make their eyes track more naturally, things like that. So there's always going to be a little bit of uptick, avatars who are performing a little better. I think it's more about matching the right ones to your content. Does your avatar look correct for what it is you're trying to do? Do they have the authority for what it is you're trying to talk or talk about, or the lack of authority? Do they seem maybe a little juvenile? We want to keep that full spectrum always, even if some of them were made a little bit, earlier than others. So we're just going to keep iterating. And I know that we're getting some people signing off here. I know we're just about at time. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. If anybody wants to drop anything in or hang out with us and ask more questions, you're more than welcome to. But Kevin, have you got anything else before we sign off?
I thought I could make it the whole time without muting myself, but I just missed this. So we just have one more question from Dan. The Dan group, will there be any improvement in previewing? At present, it's static. So if we export and need to make changes, we have to export again, and that eats into our allowance. We definitely hear you there. Unfortunately, we don't have any new information at the time. We definitely understand that it is frustrating, but we always are making. Oh wait, did I miss something? Go ahead.
It's not live yet, but it is an upcoming feature of
All
being able to
right.
preview live. And Dan, I'm only saying this because Dan Vlad said it too, so I have permission. But it is a feature that is coming where the preview will incorporate active avatars. It won't be potentially as smooth as the final cut, but you'll have a way better sense of what it's going to look like, how your avatars are going to act, and that's coming in the nearest future. Again, we don't have specifics on timelines. We never have dates, but it is a feature that's been wildly requested and that our product team is happily working on right now.
And Kathy, more diversity, meaning African Americans with natural hairstyles. Yes, we are trying to create a library that is representative of the entire world, not just in look, but also in voice as well. So we're keeping on.
Yeah.
And with that takes us to time. Ellie, I think that unfortunately, we could talk about this forever. While we still have all these folks in the room, again, we encourage you to reach out. You have both of our emails, or just respond to the webinar invite. We hate to leave you here, but we know that you all have busy lives, especially those of you who are joining us from the US and are just getting your day started. But thank you so much for coming through. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to more of these webinars, but also let us know, please, in the feedback, in the survey, let us know if this was valuable for you and what type of content or best in class examples you want to know. Jacqueline, thank you very much. I'm excited to see you too. Yeah, we'll leave you there. Ellie, can you DJ again and play us out?
Happily. Thanks everybody for coming. It's been a blast having you all here, and we'll see you again in the not too distant future, I'm absolutely sure.